Hey everyone, quick content warning about this one. There are brief discussions about child abuse that happen in this episode as part of an ongoing investigation that's being done by Steve and his team at military.com. They're not overly graphic or descriptive, but they are in there. They are part of the story as well. So I just wanted to give everybody a heads up. Hey everyone, Francis here from What a Hell of a Way to Die. If you've been wondering how you can support myself and Nate here on the show, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/hellofawaytodie. Joining the Patreon at any level gets you access to our Discord server, one bonus episode a month, and early access to interviews. At the $5 level, you'll get more bonus content and an opportunity to vote on monthly Zoo Crew episodes. And at the $10 and up level, you'll get exclusive stickers, patches, and pins sent out to you every quarter. Your support means that we can keep our regular episodes free and make sure we don't have to rely on advertisers. If you can, please consider joining and supporting your two favorite veteran dads.
Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. He ain't gonna jump no more.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It's Francis, and with me today I have Steve Beynon from military.com. Steve, who has come on the show many times to talk about his excellent writing that he has going on over there. Steve, how you doing on a Tuesday afternoon?
Excellent, man. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me yet again to talk about all the Army nonsense that's always going on.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of I'm sure really cool Army stuff happening, and there's also always a lot of really bad Army stuff happening. Sometimes you got to find the things in the middle, I did want to. I think we talked. I don't know if I talked to you about it, but the how they're getting rid of all of their online schooling and everything, and making decisions.
Yeah, that's Army done good. I don't know what more of a slam dunk the Army can do. Well, I guess it's not having to begin with, but getting rid of I think nearly 300 hours cumulatively of online training. And that's especially difficult for guardsmen and reservists. And that was that is Army done well.
Yeah, we the Army loves to make some decisions, and we'll get to some of those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But first off, I wanted to talk about an article, a news story that came to light earlier. I guess it's June now, so back in mid-May, where a soldier somehow got honeypotted into traveling to Russia and then got arrested for being a huge dumbass. And look, I've got to I gotta hold out a little hope for this guy because he is a fellow staff sergeant. It's hard being the middling NCO. Sometimes you're real down bad, I guess, and you've got to get yourself a little Natasha for your Boris, So kind of take us through what's the backstory here. What's happening with this?
Right. So this guy, Staff Sergeant Gordon Black, infantry guy in his mid-30s, he was stationed in South Korea, and for at least a year, probably longer, developed this relationship with this Russian woman who met him in South Korea several times, and he was actually going to PCS to Fort Cavazos in Texas, previously known as Fort Hood. But instead of going there like he was supposed to, he went to Russia, met with this woman. We're not entirely sure what happened. Now, the problem with the story is we're getting a lot of our information from Russian state-sponsored media, but the narrative that they have put out is he stole some money from her, and then he was detained by Russian authorities, and he is still in Russian jail. He'll be there for at least another month. He tried to appeal to be released before his trial. The courts denied that in Russia, and so he's going to stay there until at least early July, when he'll have his trial.
So it looks like Staff Sergeant is already married to an American woman that he's going through a divorce with. So big Staff Sergeant energy there. Already looking to get into his next really big spot of trouble with with anybody, it seems, because this. Look, we all been down bad, Steve. I'm not going to say that we haven't all had our embarrassing moments when it comes to our loneliness. And I know that he met this woman a few times in Korea. So, do we have any information on how this relationship kind of happened? He's meeting. It just seems very strange that it would just he would be able to do this without anybody kind of knowing what's going on.
Yeah, no, we went through his social media, or both his and the woman's social media going back, about a year or two, and it's a lot of just normal couple posts. So this relationship was not hidden. We don't know what's going on with the wife. They were in the middle of a divorce, but he was not, or at least she wasn't hiding this at all. And in some social media posts, she referred to him as husband. We don't really know what's going on with that, but it was a lot of just normal couple posts. Them just going out to bars or whatever. She did Photoshop him out of an image and reposted it at a restaurant, which was just so savage. And it's so clear that she's with someone at this table, and she just did some sort of Photoshop to where he's just not there anymore. It's horrifying. She just disappeared him. But there's also evidence of domestic violence in the relationship. His mother did the staff sergeant's mother did an interview with Reuters where she said several times Sergeant Black, her son, and the Russian girlfriend got into very serious altercations. In one event, the mother alleged the Russian woman stabbed him. So this guy was not in a good spot. And kind of going back to the social media posts, we get into this weird propaganda question where there's one video in particular where she's just interviewing him basically on his opinions on Donald Trump and the war in Ukraine. And there's nothing wrong with saying, let's talk about Trump and politics and NATO, what anyone does on a date, right? And she's just asking him very pointed questions like, would Trump be good for Russia? Is NATO aggressive? Just really odd, very specific questions. That's not a normal conversation. And she's just recording him. He's not in uniform, though. They're just at a restaurant. And he's giving very Russian-y talking points. Biden's weak. Trump's good for Russia. NATO's aggressive. It was very, very strange. And the talking points were just so in lockstep with Kremlin talking points. It might be a little easy to overanalyze those videos. But those conversations in the post were not framed in normal conversations or hot takes.
Right. It does. These videos seem like hostage video more than anything.
Yes.
But
yeah. Yeah. It kind of goes. I don't want to say it's related to domestic violence, but the relationships seem kind of weirdly one-sided. There's this other video she posted of, I guess he's coming to visit her in Russia at another time, or she's visiting him. It's not really clear who's visiting who. And they're exchanging gifts. And he got her like a really nice, like new iPad, and she got him a pair of socks. So, I mean, this poor guy.
As a soldier, Steve, socks really important. Like we know that you need good socks. I don't know if they're good socks though.
It's unclear.
Though.
It's unclear in the video if it's those super awesome like Hua $25 socks you find at the PX. He is an infantry guy, so that stuff's helpful. But we don't know, and I feel like most people listening, if you are in a situation where you and your partner are exchanging gifts, there's probably a vibe on how much money each person is spending. at least a broad barometer where someone thinks they should get the other person an iPad, the other person is getting socks. It might create a little bit of a weirdness. And going back to what he stole, we don't know, but the Russian media said he stole about 200,000 rubles from her, which is loosely equivalent to about $2,200.
Mm. Maybe. I wouldn't put it past anybody in this relationship because we already know one side is abusive. So perhaps, but also it sounds like she's doing this, he stole from me, put him in jail. And he is not, look, prison anywhere is not great, but certainly Russian prison is going to be worse.
Yeah. Yeah, there was one. I didn't put in any of my reportings. I only saw it at one spot. And even within Russian media, there's still like tiers of media like we have in the country. And I found like a very low tier Russian blog that alleged that he also stole alcohol from her, which I thought was a very interesting touch. Like, I'm taking $2,000 and I'm grabbing this bottle of vodka out the door. That's an interesting image.
That is a very soldier thing to do, though.
I saw that. Yeah, any other situations like that's a little weird, but
That adds a little bit more credibility to it, honestly.
It does.
He stole some money, whatever. He stole booze. All right, now I'm with you.
This is an infantry non-commissioned officer in the Army. Like I totally that it's
going
very
through a divorce.
Going through a divorce and clearly going through some sort of altercation with his mysterious Russian girlfriend.
So he's in jail. Do we have any idea if there's any I guess the last time we had something like this happen was Private King running across North Korea, and
Yes.
North Korea kind of doing it like, ugh, we don't want to deal with this, and giving him back.
Right.
Russia seems like a more dangerous place to do that. Like, I don't think Russia's given anything back.
Yeah, and it's good to note that there's a couple things that are true at the same time here. Russia does have American prisoners as using as political collateral, prisoner exchanges and whatnot. We haven't seen any evidence that they're going to do that with this staff sergeant, but there's also no reason to put that past him. We've already seen them using their detained Wall Street Journal reporter in some weird bargaining shit with Donald Trump. If he becomes president, like they'll release. At least this is what Trump says. If he becomes president, they'll release him. So who knows what's going to end up being the case with this guy? I wouldn't put him in that same group of arrested Americans yet. And also, King was his own weird story where he was in a lot of trouble for assault and other crimes. We don't have any reason to think Black was fleeing anything or was otherwise in trouble with the Army. So we're definitely in kind of a wait and see what happens with this trial and what Russia ends up sentencing him to, if anything.
Yeah, keep an eye. Call your staff sergeants. They might need help. They're in a weird place in their career, guys. They are trying to figure out if they need to get out or move up. They're probably going through their second divorce. Reach out. Make sure they're not, stealing money from a Russian honeypot.
Everybody wants to know where your NCO is, not how's your NCO.
How's your NCO? Is he doing okay? Did he steal a bottle of vodka from a Russian woman and now he's in Russian prison? It's the way it goes.
Hey, if that's the only thing that happened, I mean, more credibility in the NCO Corps, as far as I'm concerned, when he gets out. But hopefully that was it.
Yeah, it's this also could be like kind of a heated fight kind of thing. Like, fuck you, I'm leaving and I'm taking this bottle of vodka with me, and then now you're in prison.
Yeah. Don't. So that's the add it to the safety brief. Don't steal from your Russian girlfriends in Russia.
Yeah, don't get honeypotted, guys. Like, especially when it's this obvious. Like if somebody's calling you from North Korea and pretending, okay, I can see how that happens. But it seems like this woman was just like, no, I'm Russian. Come on over here. I'm gonna stab you. I'm gonna stab you, and you're gonna love me.
Yeah, and also leave your Russian girlfriend if she stabs you. You can do better.
Unless you're into that, you know what? We don't kink shame here on What a Hell of a Way to Die. If you want to be stabbed by your Russian girlfriend, more power to you. But just be sure that you don't steal her vodka. All right, so Steve, you had you were working on a really big story. And it seems to be it's come out, and there have been a lot of bits and pieces to this. So I wanted to know about the military handling of abuse at daycares that has been happening, and kind of take us through like the very beginnings of you and your team hearing about this up into the reporting that you have today.
Right. So this started. So in a nutshell, this whole investigation is about how the military systemically abuses, neglects kids, and hides that information from parents. And not only does that, it has systems in place to protect the institution. Right. And this all started with, as a news organization, you hit these kind of stories and onesies and twosies, like, oh, this happened with this kid here, this happened with this kid here. And then we started noticing a pattern. Is like, why is this systemic? And we kind of answered that question when I wrote a story about an incident at Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania. That is the home of the Army's War College. This was late last year, and there was an incident there of what's called problematic sexual behavior between children. And this is an official term. It's relatively new in the childcare space, but it's basically when one kid sexually touches another one. They don't really call it assault because these kids, they're 3 or 4 years old. They largely don't know what they're doing. And this behavior can be them mimicking something they saw. It could be them mimicking something that happened to them through abuse, or just, kids doing like exploring bodies. And I don't mean that in a sexual way, just doing things, right?
3 and 4-year-olds are going to touch stuff, and their hands are always sticky. So
yes,
it's just the way of things with kids. But there is, like you're saying, there are certainly 3 and 4-year-olds, hugging or whatever versus performing, mimicking sex acts. That's not something that comes natural to a 3 or 4-year-old.
Right. Yeah. And they might mimic a sex act, but they might not they obviously don't understand what that is. And that might not even necessarily be an indication that they've seen the sex act. We need to differentiate. This isn't always a symptom of abuse or the kid walked in on the parents or something. Sometimes it is just kids doing things. They don't know what they're doing. So we found this incident at Carlisle Barracks where a kid was anally penetrated by another one. The mother brings this situation to us. And at first we have that question, be like, okay, is this kids doing stuff, whatever. And what made it a story wasn't that this happened necessarily, right? It's still tragic, it's terrible, but it was that the family had to hire a lawyer and they can't get basic information on what happened with their kid. Their kid had behavioral changes and issues a month before this happened. They've noticed injuries weeks before they knew this happened. This includes some bleeding, scratches on the penis. That's another reason why these situations are really bad. Even if it's otherwise, I'm doing air quotes, innocent, this can obviously lead to a lot of situations where the kid's injured.
There needs to be intervention one way or the other.
There needs to be intervention right away, regardless of the abuse is present. There's injuries, and obviously this can have, the experts say this can have domino effects for their sexual growth later, their relationship.
You can't have the feral child running around wild.
Right. And the real sticking point was the daycare knew this happened and didn't tell the parents for 2 days. And we're like, okay, what is going on here? And what we found is the Army doesn't have to tell you if this stuff happens. And they definitely don't have to provide parents with documentation. So in the civilian world, most people listening, if you have kids in daycare, you get incident reports. And most parents will agree, if anything, civilian daycares over-report child injuries. They get incident reports and phone calls anytime their kid bumps their knee on a table. I've talked to parents that had their 4th phone call with the daycare that day. There's I don't need to hear every time my kid gets hit in the head with a dodgeball. Are they bleeding and conscious? No. Okay, fine. Don't call.
Thank you for building character in my child. Stop calling me.
Right. So the military, it's an overcorrection, right? And but it's also, they do that with how state laws are written. So Pennsylvania, for example, it says something basically to the effect of, if anything happens to your kid, you're going to document it. You're going to give a copy to the parent, and you're going to tell the parent immediately. And most states have language that's similar. And when you dig into the Army reg, here's where the story gets a little boring, but here's where everything kind of comes together. The Army has multiple regs that deal with childcare, right? I had to spend probably a week or two just understanding it all. It has different ARs and XORs and memos, and it's very difficult to piece together and answer the basic question of, if your kid is hurt or abused or something weird fucking happens, when do the parents have to know? And the Army has different timetables for different kind of events. And because the reg didn't cite problematic sexual behavior, technically them delaying notifying the parents didn't break any rules, right? It's one of those did you didn't write it down, so I didn't break any rules, right?
Right.
And so and they had to hire a lawyer just to get this basic information. And so we wrote that story up. And, my editor comes to us and be like, this is too weird. It's one thing. Hey, an incident happens at a daycare, right? Okay. Shit happens, right? Why does the rules effectively they're built to protect the institution? That's what we found in the reg, right? The reg tells you to go to public affairs and the commander before you even tell the parent, right? You need talking points before you go to the parent. That's a huge
That's
huge
re-
issue.
as PAO, that's real fucked up. Like, I'm sorry
Yeah.
if you're coming to me and saying, "Hey, I need talking points for like the abuse that's happening in the child care center." There is not. There is a. You need to just tell them what's going on, and you need to tell everybody what's going on
Yeah.
because that shit's got to stop. Don't
Yeah,
abuse
it
kids.
is written. Yeah,
It's
it is
simple.
written in Army regs that if you suspect the incident can garner media attention, you go to public affairs and you go to public affairs first, right? So write that story up, and then we go into this like long investigation where we reach out to, or a lot of parents reach out to us. I put out a call on Reddit. Our two other reporters, Constantine, who typically covers the Pentagon and the Navy, and Rachel, who's now with the New York Times. They found some families, and we all kind of like compare notes. Cumulatively, we interviewed probably about 15 or so parents with all ranges of incidents and stories, but they had one thing in common: that they couldn't get basic straight answers. They had incidents involving from concussions with their kids to like bops, right? But the same consistent thing: they don't get incident reports, right? And that documentation is important to take to doctors and whatever. And the Army reg is super vague on when you do that. And there's actually a typo that I gave to the Army where they reference different DA forms, like different DA form numbers in different parts of the reg, but refers to them as incident reports. And I still never got a straight answer of like, did you change it or is this a typo? Because I can't find either of them online on Army pubs.
Well, guess what? That might be by design.
Right. And they're like, well, garrisons use their own. And that's the other issue. They delegate a lot of this stuff to how daycares are run to garrison commanders. And it's very hard for them to answer. When you ask the question with, I understand different garrisons and environments, you need to do different things for that environment. That makes sense. But why does the reg not say just tell the parents when something happens? That shouldn't be different if you're at Campbell or if you're in Hawaii. Tell the parents if the kid gets hurt. Right,
and
document it. That doesn't need to be localized.
That's what makes sense to me. And I know on military bases, as you said, they're in states, but they're considered federalized, so they don't have to follow the state guidelines. But and sometimes you just wonder, like, well, is it just that nobody? Is it there to specifically protect the institution, or has just nobody gotten around to updating these things? And saying, oh, this is what everybody else is doing. This is what we should be doing as well. We don't see a problem with it the way that it's running, so we don't need to make any updates. And now this is where you see the problems come in, is when you don't have this mandatory reporting.
And if it's not on purpose, if you were going to protect the institution on purpose and hide things from the parents, I don't know what you would do differently. We talked to families who had to file FOIAs for just documentation or surveillance footage on kids that had concussions or bruises. The whole system is built to not tell parents anything. And yes, no, the Army day or the military daycares do not have to follow those state laws or norms as civilian daycares. But what we found is on paper, in terms of how rules are written down, children are less safe at military daycares than your average civilian daycare based on just laws.
They're more in danger than your average soldier. Like, if I fall and get a concussion, that's a lot. That's what is it? An LOD, a line of duty. That's money for me for the rest of my life because I've gave myself a brain lesion by slipping on a cigarette butt that the private didn't pick up in the motor pool. So but you have those, like those are there for reporting, but also the soldier themselves can be like, shit, I fell and bumped my head. I need to go to medical. I need to do these things. A 3-year-old doesn't have that, doesn't have that, agency, one, but also they're 3. They don't know these things. They don't know I hit my head. I need to go see somebody about this because that could be a problem.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is, daycare is expensive. Even if parents wanted to pull their kids out of these daycares, the average enlisted family doesn't really have the money for daycares. The average civilian daycare costs about $1,500 a month now. Military families can't afford that.
Yeah. It's, and you've got and that's always the way it is with the military, right? Like you get the we've got lodging for you. It probably has black mold. Yeah, we've got medical facilities for you. You can only go during this very specific time in the morning. So when you're sick, you better be sick at 5 o'clock in the morning. Or no, you better be sick the night before so you can ask for the sick call slip so you can go to sick call. It's and I always love when people tout like, oh, if you want all these things, you should join the army and then you get all that shit for free. It sucks though. Like, it's not good. And oftentimes this is a problem because of these, the military doesn't have the robust systems that a state or the federal government has, and a lot of people and a lot of things to manage, right? So I imagine all these daycare things in the civilian world about reporting and making sure that you're telling the parents what's happening to the kids all comes from having a lot of people that work in specifically, I work for childcare for the state of Missouri or the state of California. These are things that I'm concerned about. I guarantee you we don't really have that in the military. And if we do not have a big, robust system of taking care of kids, because that's not what the Army does. The Army doesn't take care of kids. The Army is a warfighting machine that has all of these other things that are kind of tacked on because the soldiers will complain if we don't have it. Like if you could have, if everybody in the Army would simply stop having children, the Army would be so much more effective.
Right. Yeah. And then we got there's a enormous reaction from both the House and Senate side of things. They both wrote their kind of respective letters to the DoD, basically asking what the fuck is going on here. Elizabeth Warren's office actually wrote their own letter. There's a couple senators that wrote one, a cumulative one, and then Warren did her own. And they basically copied and pasted our whole story and just said, what's going on with this? One more paragraph from our story. What's going on with this? Basically, they want a DoD comment on like a line. They want line by line on our reporting. And we're starting to see some stuff kind of introduced. Congresswoman Takuda from Hawaii introduced an amendment into this year's NDAA that would effectively get daycares into that civilian norm state law thing of, hey, when things happen to your kids, tell the parents right away. That's all.
It seems like that's the big, like, this isn't some sort of endemic abuse issue that's happening at daycares all over on every military base. This is just kind of we know that, like, there's this thing and you guys aren't following the regulations that everybody else follows. And if we're seeing it here, where else are we not seeing it? As soon as you get a peek into the crack of what's happening, you're going to see all the cockroaches on the other side of the wall.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of like the biggest issue. It's really hard, and that's almost kind of what the point of the story was. It's really hard to say, oh, the Army or Navy or DoD as a whole are breaking regulations and not notifying parents, because the regulations are all over the place. It's very patchwork. It's very hard to say if they're technically breaking rules. The parents eventually got this, but they wanted to charge this one group of parents $15,000 for security footage for their kid that got several injuries. Instead of just providing, the parents eventually got it, but this goes back to the reg does not have to document things or give things to parents. That's sort of what the issue here, and Congress seems to be making some moves to simplify that just says, hey, we're not going to say. If this happens, tell the parents. If that happens, tell the parents. Just if anything happens, going back to those state laws, that sort of language, just tell the parents. Keep the parents in the loop. Have some basic documentation, and we're all good.
Right, and once again, it also doesn't sound like this is abuse between the caretakers and the children. This is kids acting up, maybe, but also just the fact that anything that happens in these places, any kind of injury that's going to happen, whether it be sexual abuse related or not, is not being documented. It's not being sent out to anybody, and that's going to be a long-term issue. And I do think that anybody who, myself, I'm a parent. I definitely, I don't want here's 100 reports on how your kid slipped and fell and scraped their knee or whatever. But at the same time, I would rather have that than not have it, because if they don't have to say it for the little things, they're not going to say it for the big things either. Yeah. All right, Steve. So let's switch gears here a little bit. We've been talking about how much facilities in the military suck. Let's talk about dining facilities, because that has been a hot topic for quite a while. So dining facilities, when I was back in my day, on military bases, dining facilities were either run by soldiers, some of them were run by contractors, but they were a big kind of cafeteria area that you could go into. all kinds of offerings, people cooking. There's always a salad bar, things like that. And it seems like we've really kind of, the military has drawn away from that. And I'm not sure if that is a budgetary thing, if soldiers are just using dining facilities in garrison less, or are they using it less because it sucks? Is it chicken or the egg kind of thing? But the Army came up with this idea of like kiosks, like you're getting lunch at the airport or something. And partially, I can kind of get that because plenty of times I've had to do dining facility on the go, and I would love to just grab some prepackaged stuff. But also plenty of times, I would love to be able to sit down with people and have a nice meal without doing Army stuff for 20 minutes or so. So what is this kiosk thing? Because your reporting says that it's going to be obsolete soon.
Correct. So yeah, so the Army spent about $4 million on food kiosks so far, and effectively by the end of by this time next year, there should be about 20 or so of them across the force. Effectively, every major installation will have at least one. Several, like Fort Campbell, will have up to 4 of them. And these are, think about those little like grab and go spots at an airport that just has like some candy, some chips, and those like prepackaged sandwiches or wraps. It's effectively the same thing. The problem is those kiosks do not have to follow Army nutritional standards. So to get the amount of protein you need, it would be very difficult in a day without consuming also like 100 grams of sugar, because most of the stuff is just like chips and garbage.
Yeah, and who's running this?
It's run by soldiers.
Okay.
I mean, built by contractors, run by soldiers.
Okay, well, at least soldiers are the ones, but it's not like a third party contractor that's pushing food on. Like,
I mean, they get the food from the same sources that stocks the commissary. So their stock is limited by what the commissary stock is, and also take into account space and refrigeration and yada yada yada. So it sounds like a good idea on paper, right? Grab and go. Soldiers are busy. Maybe drive around post. Oh, let's go grab a sandwich real quick. But these aren't the kind of places. Again, think about that airport stand. It's a great little convenient spot. You get a little roast beef wrap or whatever. It's not great to sustain yourself long term off those things. You can't eat that thing 3 times every day for a month at a time. I don't remember who. I think it was some like senior NCO that's on Twitter, and I know Twitter is not real life, but he was like, I tried out the kiosk and it's great. It's him like eating a sandwich with like a bag of Doritos, and I was like, I'm sure that thing is great once in a while. And also just nutritionally, right? We want soldiers to be healthy and be able to, crush their ACFT in the ruck march and whatever. You can't do that off Doritos. But anyway, so
right, I would love make it an option. Maybe just like, hey, you're coming in, you can grab some food that we're cooking, or you can some. And again, I know that there's a lot of budgetary stuff that comes in about what happens to this food, does it get used, how do you know who's going to grab this or grab that? But like, even if you just break it down to like, look, just lunchtime, grab something from the kiosk, breakfast and dinner we'll have for you, kind of makes sense. That lunchtime, it's always hard to judge when soldiers are going to have time for lunch, So like just having it, look, it's open for 3 hours, come grab whatever you want. And then we'll be prepped for dinner for you. I feel like something like that would work out a little bit better.
Yeah. So kiosks are an idea that briefs really well, that when you actually go into it and kind of see the nutritional value, it doesn't really hold up very well. So the Army is in this weird position, right? They say I wouldn't say they're divesting on DFACs, but definitely not investing in DFACs. We don't have any reason to think they're closing them or reducing, whatever. The schedules are weird. When I started kind of auditing the schedules that they post online, a lot of garrisons post on the Facebook, there's just like weird inconsistencies with hours and days. It's actually really hard to keep track of. If I am at Fort Liberty, what commissary is open consistently for Tuesday evening? It's very weirdly inconsistent. So kiosks, it's an idea that briefs well. So the Army has that issue, right? It doesn't really know what to do with those dining facilities, and it says they'll say soldiers aren't using them in numbers that warrants investment. So this is when we get to the chicken and egg problem of the Army's not investing in DFACs, which I'm sure a lot of people listening has been to an Air Force one, and those things are awesome.
Why doesn't everybody just go to the Air Force and do what they do? Like, they're already doing it right. They're always doing it right.
Yeah, it's extremely anecdotal, but I went to an Air Force defect at Fort Dix, and they had like a Korean bowl station, a sandwich spot. They made brick oven pizza. They had a very significant salad bar, and it was like all of the food was about a quality of a fast casual, like a Panera or something. It was really good. I would pay I wouldn't pay a lot, but I would pay to go there. Meanwhile, the Army DFAC is hey, do you want some unseasoned tilapia and some boiled broccoli?
It's yakisoba night, baby. Noodles
Yeah,
and meat.
yeah. So of course no one's going to the defect because the food sucks, right?
Hmm.
Uh,
And now they're unveiling this like, oh, food sucks, but would you like food that sucks in a package?
right. So yeah, do you do you want food that sucks in a bag?
Yeah.
And so the army just can't figure out what to do with its food. And I probably should do a story on like how does the Air Force get it right, because you have a smaller branch kind of nailing it. If we kind of rewind the clock to the previous SMA Grinston, this was like a big issue on his radar that he just never quite was able to move the logistics on. A big thing they were looking into under his tenure was using your meal cards just at the commissary, right? What if I just take my meal card, go straight to the grocery store, get whatever the hell I want? You know, they have like sushi there and like more options for sandwiches and protein shakes, and maybe you go to the restaurants in there and go to the tropical smoothie cafe or whatever, right? Still not optimal, but it's another option for the soldiers, right? And he was looking at like protein shake stands and a bunch of other stuff. They were just even using the meal card for restaurants off post. As you can imagine, that is a logistics thing. That is a mountain to cover. But what they're still looking into, and here's where it gets goofy, they're still moving forward with the idea of using the meal card at commissaries. And if we remember, here's what's goofy, right? The kiosk is just a smaller version, is a bite-sized representation of that commissary. It's the same stuff, just a smaller selection. So you think eventually when the Army figures out how to let soldiers use the meal card at the commissary, presumably, if you're a soldier driving around post, the kiosk and the commissary are not that far apart. So if I can get to one, I probably get to the other, right? So they just spent $4 million on these kiosks nobody likes, right? And presumably, I don't know if it's a year from now, 2 years from now, I can use my meal card at the commissary. So why? So already no one wants to go to the kiosk. And so that issue is going to be compounded when you can use the meal card at the commissary.
Maybe we can move the cold boxes over to the commissary. Like, you know, look, create like an area. Like, hey, if you're coming in to use your meal plan card, here's where you can grab some stuff from. Though I wouldn't want them to just be like, here's the selection, here's your choice, and this is it. And if you want like the good stuff, the good sandwiches, the grocery store sushi, which can be pretty good. I've never had it from the commissary, but I do enjoy grocery store sushi on occasion. I don't want those to be somewhere else. It's like, no, if you want that, you got to pay the $12, but you can have the shitty sandwich and some Doritos for you. Oh, it's a big bag of Doritos though.
Yeah, so it's a weird issue. You look at the limited selection of the kiosk, which basically you want like a tuna packet, some Nesquik, some Doritos, whatever. It's going to be obsolete in a couple years. It screams an issue that no one really thought about. And I say that because when I'm writing these stories, like I asked the Army, hey, can I talk to someone at AMC, Army Material Command, which ultimately kind of heads this whole project? Does anybody want to talk about this? You're spending a lot of money on it. It is on paper, from the Army's perspective, you are working to solve a problem that's very complex. How do you feed the soldier, right? You think you want to talk about that if you're very proud of it. They don't want to talk about it. They haven't really put up a lot of social media on it. This is a weird project that somebody's doing that they don't want to talk about, and they're basically hiding.
Right. And it sounds like it started to go through, and then they're just like, oh God, we made a huge mistake, but it'll cost even more if we try to stop it at this point.
Yeah, I think the only press, or not the only press, but this really just came to attention through the Hots and Cots app, where I think we're both friends. Yeah. And people listening, if you haven't, I highly recommend y'all check them out.
I had Rob on a few months ago, back when the app was still pretty new. So yeah, absolutely. If you are in the military, check out the Hots and Cots app. It's where you too can be a Yelp reviewer, but for Army dining facilities.
Yeah, so Rob got a lot of reviews coming in on these kiosks with them being out of stock. So you have this. So add that to the list of problems we have here. We have bad nutrition. We have a system that kind of briefs well, but in practice doesn't seem to work very well. It's going to be obsolete, and they can't even keep the shelves in stock. And that might sound counterintuitive. No one likes it, but they can't keep the stuff in stock. But the space is so small, if 30 soldiers go there, the place is already going to be ransacked because of how limited the space is and how limited inventory can be there uh, on site. And going back to the nutritional value, the soldiers, yes, they ransack it, and it's cookies and Doritos and stuff like that. And maybe I'm sounding like a Sergeant Major Boomer here, but private's not. I get what the private's doing.
Yeah, it's hard to make. Look, for me, like I would eat a salad every day if somebody had a salad bar laid out for me, but I don't have that. And it's easier to make good decisions when somebody's like, look, I already cooked broccoli, I already cooked corn, there's a salad bar set up over there. But when it's like, look, here's your options and none of it is good, like even those grab and go salads are kind of weak at best. So when you're it's you don't sound like the crusty Sergeant Major, because the soldiers just aren't getting a better option here. And that does, in this article, some of the lower enlisted, the junior enlisted, talking about like, I want something other than Mountain Dew and Doritos. And that is going to cause, the Army's fat enough, like I'm not to shame us, man, but like we got weight problems all across America. And the fact that we're just constantly like, oh no, here's something quick and easy, because it's quick and easy and cheap, and it's not the hard thing that's better for you, we just tend to go for that. And I know the military tends to go for that too.
Yeah, no, yeah. Listen, Joe's going to order Domino's. Joe's going to do the dip or the Zen or whatever they do. I'm holding a skateboard and saying, hello, fellow kids now. But in the Army leadership has talked about it. Let's go back to SMA Grinston. Like the nutrition was a huge concern of his. I go back to previous SMA because the current SMA doesn't do press and we don't know what he's thinking or doing. Grinston talked a lot about nutrition and that value and that problem. The Army has done a lot to change the fitness game. It's new fitness test. Most people will agree that it is a pretty damn good measurement of fitness. There's obviously some adjustments to be made. Some people are asking for, but it's pretty good. Hey, if you can run 2 miles in 13, 14 minutes and deadlift over 300 pounds, you're probably a pretty fit soldier. And it has this holistic health and fitness reg, which goes into like, hey, sleep's important, yada, yada, yada. So they've done all these things on health that, the fitness test being the big part, right? We bought all these kettlebells and we're doing sprints and we're chucking weight balls and stuff. It just hasn't done the other half, the diet nutrition part. It can't quite figure that out for whatever reason. And meanwhile, hey, go to the Air Force and you're going to get your avocado salad.
Hey, I don't know what the Air Force fitness standards are like. I know they only have to run 1.5 miles though. So.
Yeah, they run 1.5 miles in like 45 minutes or something. I don't know.
Yeah, they learned. I think I read about that too, because the Air Force went with it because they're like, no, we can find out, your cardio abilities through 1.5 miles. We don't have to do any of the other stuff. And the Army and Marines are like, no, you need to keep running. You need to keep doing it. And I think that's maybe the Air Force just has a little bit more of an eye on efficiency in that reserve, or maybe whoever was setting it up was like, I don't want to run fucking 2 miles, 1.5 miles. There we go.
Yeah, I always feel like the Air Force is like 5 years ahead of the game on stuff. So usually whenever I'm looking into like policy or culture stuff, like I kind of try to see what the Air Force is doing as a very, I wouldn't say a North Star, but a very broad arrow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, Steve, thank you so much for coming on to talk about your stories. I will have Steve's Twitter account and a link to his military.com profile, so you can read all of these stories that we're talking about and all the other good stuff that Steve's got coming down the pipeline. So if we get any updates to any of these, we'll bring you back on, Steve, and we'll talk about them.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me, man.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next week.